back in storage, and I want to get some work started on this air conditioner. And I think what I've decided I'm going to do is, instead of putting in this 10,000 BTU, I'm going to start with the 5,000. And instead of putting it in the door, I'm going to put it in the window. I just feel like if I do something that's going to be simpler and I succeed at that, that's going to give me the confidence. And maybe if it's not enough to cool the van, then I can throw the bigger AC in the door and do that. But possibly with tapping into the ductwork of the main, like the rear AC, then maybe the 5,000 BTU would be enough. And if it is, that keeps me from having to buy a new generator, which would be like $1,000, and then having to figure out how I'm going to put it on the back. And I've already determined that's going to be like a major issue. So I'm just going to start with this one. I want to get it in there and just see how it works and see if it works. But before I do that, I want to see if I can troubleshoot why my battery monitor is not reading correctly. So I have some leads on what to look at. Let me grab a light, some gloves. The problem is this whole area back here is one giant disaster area. This is how you don't want to do the electrical system. So there's a lot of things wrong with this picture. I'm well aware of that. Not least of which is a disaster area, but just keep in mind this stuff was added in over the years. When I started, this was a lot cleaner looking, but I just kept adding and adding and adding, you know. So I got two Lifetime 400 amp hour batteries here. These replaced my previous bank of, so there's one here and then there's one here. So I had 4 100 amp hour Battleborns. Okay, so 1 year ago I replaced those because those other ones weren't really holding a charge very well. They were getting very hot. I just felt like they were coming to the end of their lifespan and they were not going to get me through a summer. 2 400 amp hours connected in parallel, that gives me 800 amp hours, 9,600 watts. I have a 2,000 watt Xantrex inverter. This thing I've had since like 2011. Like it runs 24/7. I never turn it off. The refrigerator runs 24/7. So this thing has done really good, thank God. AC to DC battery charger for, you know, because my 600 watts of solar doesn't do a good job of charging these with all the power that I use on a regular basis. Charge controller buried way back there. But, you know, first of all, I have no idea what's going on back here. I don't come back here often enough, you know, to really know or remember what all these wires are or where they're going. So I had to take all that time to do that just to figure it out. You know, I have this thing here as just a reminder to myself of what can happen if you're not careful. Somehow I crossed some wires and this thing was just bundled up but plugged into something, and it melted substantially. Not only did it melt, but like it was sitting on a piece of wood back here, just part of this framing, which actually started to char and turn black. So under there somewhere is, but like that could have been a fire, that would have been a disaster. And so you definitely, but you know, space is at a premium here. I don't have a lot of space to work with. You know, from, like I said, when I first started, I just had 2 100 amp hour batteries, and I had lots of room back here. I had like one of these things, these fuse boxes. Now I have 3 of them. There's 2 here, and there's one down in the corner on the other side of the van. And just, you know, this wasn't here, that wasn't there. All these wires, that's for the surveillance system, which I just pulled out of my last apartment. But you know, there's a lot of wires that go with each camera. Like where are you gonna put them? You don't need all that wire, so it's got to go somewhere. So it's just, you know, just sitting here for now. I don't know what this is. This is probably for the speakers, which I rarely use. So my issue is that the battery monitor is not reading the full watts that the solar is getting or that this thing is getting. And I think my ground wires are maybe not connected properly. So somehow I have to get back in there, deal with this shunt here, and some of the ground wires, like that's coming off of this charge controller here, and see if I can figure out if this is wired properly, and if it is, because I'm not getting a proper reading, which means my state of charge is always off, and I don't know how much power I have, and it's not I don't know how much power I'm getting when I'm charging. So I'm gonna start digging into there. Hopefully I can do that and figure out where some of these ground wires are going. Okay, so as I suspected, there's no way I can get to these wires and figure out where they're going. I want to know where the negative battery wire is going. There's literally no way I can get back there. So my options are, well, there's really only one option, which is to completely tear apart the entire thing, strip it all down, and then I can finally get back into accessing and identifying some of these wires. And literally everything, like all the connections have to come out. This whole structure has to be unscrewed and taken out piece by piece. And that's pretty much just how it works. So you can't just pull the batteries out. I don't have a setup like that. There's like no way to get back in there because I'm not set up for that. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the wire from here, and I'm going to get a new wire, which is this one here, and I'm going to put it where it's supposed to be, which would just be straight from the negative over here to this connection on this shunt. And I'm going to see if that fixes my battery monitor readings, and if it does, I'll know that's the problem. If it doesn't, then I don't know what's going on. I'm back to the drawing board. And then if that works, you know, I can, at some point in time, when I have more time, I can just tear all this down and just kind of clean up the wiring and put it where it's supposed to be. Probably I won't do that. Probably I'll just leave it. If it's working, that's the reason this looks the way it does, is because it's like, if it works, I don't have the time to deal with all this, so I'm just going to leave it how it is. And that's why it looks like this too, is that I didn't have the time to make it all looking fancy and all that kind of stuff. So just, you throw stuff in there, and as long as it works, then you kind of hope for the best. So if this works, then probably I'll leave it until maybe if I get a lot of time on my hands, you know, I can just get back in here and just start systematically taking all this out, making sure the wiring's where it needs to go, cleaning up some of this stuff that I don't need or is in the way, and try and get it out of the way. Like, it's just a rat's nest full of shit back here, and I just can't, like, I have no idea, where these wires are going. And so if I know exactly where they're going, and I fix part of my problem, then I might be motivated to get back there sometime and clean that up. But in the meantime, I'm going to test this out and see if this works. Okay, so that solved the problem. Apparently, somehow, the ground wire from the charge controller and the AC to DC controller charger got connected, like it got split. So part of it was going to the shunt, and part of it was going somehow getting connected to the negative ground on the battery. So it was bypassing the shunt, which means my battery monitor was not reading all of the power that these things were putting out. Like, I would see a maximum of like 150 watts from my solar panels. For years, this has been baffling me and driving me insane. And so if I pulled out into the sun to test it, and I wasn't getting the full 600 watts, but I mean, there could be a lot of reasons for that, but I was getting like well over what I would normally get. Like, I was in the 200 plus watt range, which I would never get that before. So hopefully that will allow me to, from now on, have a better estimate of where my batteries are currently sitting at, the state of charge. Because if that's been off, then that means my battery monitor reading has been off this entire time, because it's not calculating the full amount of solar or charge that the batteries are getting. Like, they're getting more charge than what the monitor's telling me, and so the monitor's basically useless. I mean, unless I just want to know, like, I don't know, what can it really tell me if that's off? Everything else is going to be off too. So I'm going to test the generator later and see what kind of watts that is putting out, and if that, like, that was off too. And so if that is fixed, then I think I'm just going to leave that alone for now. I do need to take some time to go back in there and clean that stuff up, and it's kind of a messy install, as you can see, but that it works, you know. So for now it's fine, and when I get some time, I will tear that down and just clean up and do some proper connections and stuff like that and tidy everything up. So in the meantime, I'm gonna start disassembling this AC back here, this 5000 BTU, and start getting that kind of prepped to go into this window. And I'm gonna start with that. And if I feel the need that it needs to, you know, we need to step that up, then we'll go ahead and we'll take the 10,000 BTU and we'll stick that right in the door. And I think if I get this job done by putting this one in the window, that'll give me the confidence to tackle this job, because that's going to be a bigger job, cutting a hole in the door, and there's just a lot of little things that you got to deal with, because it's not like it wasn't designed for that, right? So and if it comes down to that, like I said too, I mean I've got to buy another generator. So that's, if I can get the 5000 BTU to work, that's one less thing I have to do, you know. And then I've just got an extra air conditioner. Maybe the next van I build, I'll throw this one in there somewhere. But since I'll do it from the beginning, right? So it won't be an afterthought like it is now, where I'm trying to figure out how to fit it in. I can do it right from the install right from the beginning. So let me get started on this and see what I can come up with.